Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the soft, golden dust of ancient Egypt, where the river Nile snakes through fields of papyrus, and the air smells faintly of warm sand and crushed herbs. You'll feel the grit under your sandals, hear the low murmur of chanting priests echoing through stone corridors, and catch the distant clang of copper tools used not for war, but for healing. We're going to spend the evening surrounded by oil lamps, murmuring gods, and yes, people who had really bad toothaches and no idea what a toothbrush was. You're stepping into a time where medicine was wrapped in magic, where the line between the spiritual and the surgical was as thin as a linen strip soaked in fig wine. Oh, and spoiler alert, some of the cures may have involved garlic paste, amulets shaped like hippos, and fly dung. You probably won't survive this as a dental patient, but luckily you're just here to relax. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, let me know where in the world you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. That's my favorite part of every video. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're wandering through the outer courts of an ancient temple. The sun's about to dip behind the horizon, casting long golden shadows over white limestone walls. You drag your fingers across the chiseled reliefs, carvings of gods with falcon heads, rows of lotus blossoms, and scenes of medicine men pressing herbs into clay bowls. Somewhere deep in the sanctuary, someone's grinding what smells like garlic with a stone pestle. You catch a sniff of it, layered over old incense, and wince just imagining that concoction going anywhere near your mouth. A light breeze brushes across your arms, cool against the warmth of the stone, and you hear the squawk of an ibis nearby. Maybe it's Thoth, the god of wisdom, peeking in to see if humans are still messing things up. You shuffle past a tall statue of Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war, healing, and sudden dental agony, apparently. Her bronze eyes seem to flicker in the twilight. You nod politely. No need to anger the lion lady. The inner sanctum is cooler, darker. The air changes here. Sand no longer crunches under your feet, it's smoothed into polished alabaster. Oil lamps flicker along the walls, casting dancing shadows that make the hieroglyphs seem to move. You reach a small wooden bench by a scroll rack. Ancient medical papyri are stored here, rolled tightly and tied with faded red cords. Some are brittle and faded. Others look like someone used them recently. You pick one up gingerly. The top edge crackles. You unroll it slowly, eyes adjusting to the fine black ink. The writing is careful, deliberate, drawn from the Ebers papyrus maybe, or something even rarer. The passage you're reading begins with a problem. If the mouth aches and the teeth rattle and the breath is hot like fire, that's a poetic way of saying someone's molars are losing the will to live. You nod. You've had that kind of pain, only they didn't have ibuprofen. Instead, the instructions recommend crushed onion, garlic, and honey wrapped in linen laid upon the teeth 3 times. Simple but intense, also a little salad-like. Outside, a conch horn sounds, calling the last temple priests to prayer. You tuck the scroll back carefully, wondering who else has read it. Maybe it cured a farmer's abscessed molar, or maybe it just made him smell so bad that everyone gave him space. As the stars begin to blink overhead, the temple becomes a quieter place. The world shrinks. The walls echo more. You feel like you're shrinking too, stepping back in time, curling into the quiet spaces between history's lines. A warm hush falls across the temple. You hear water being poured into bowls. A small brazier is lit in the corner, scenting the air with myrrh and burnt lotus. And just as you think you might sit down and drift off into this old-world comfort, you hear something, a faint groan coming from deeper inside the temple. Not pain exactly, more like discomfort wrapped in sleep. A priest passes by, glances at you, and mutters, "The old man again." The ache returns. Your ears perk up, the ache. You follow the priest's retreating robes, careful not to make your sandals slap against the floor. He turns down a narrow hallway lined with painted scenes, healers pressing herbs into swollen cheeks, gods holding ankhs over mouths. These people took teeth seriously. And why wouldn't they? Ancient Egyptians lived in a land full of grit and sand, where their bread, baked with stone-ground grain, often included tiny bits of sand that slowly wore down enamel like a slow-motion sandblaster. Combine that with a sugary diet of figs and dates, and yeah, their mouths were pretty much ancient crime scenes. You reach a side chamber, low ceiling, woven mat on the floor. An older man lies on his side, face turned away, groaning softly. A girl, not quite a woman, kneels beside him, dipping a cloth into a bowl of something dark and pungent. She dabs his jawline with practiced ease, muttering something under her breath. Her fingers are stained with ink, a scribe. She glances at you. Her eyes are sharp, brown, a little tired. You know this is her father. And even though she's not wearing priestly robes or carrying a healing amulet, you can feel the weight of her mission. She's not just comforting him. She's trying something, testing something. You watch as she adjusts the wrap on his jaw, lifts a small clay pot and uncorks it. The smell of garlic and resin escapes into the air. You don't interrupt. You just sit quietly watching history unfold in a small, personal moment. Not a pharaoh, not a war, just a daughter, a toothache, and a bowl of things she hopes will help. Outside, the moon is rising. You lean back against the wall, the stone cool on your spine, and wonder, how many remedies did this place witness? How many worked? The girl with the ink-stained fingers doesn't look up right away. She's busy smearing a dark, tarry mixture onto a strip of linen with the slow, deliberate motion of someone who's done this too many times and still isn't sure if it works. You recognize her from earlier, Merit, the temple's scribe. Not a healer by training, but clearly someone who's decided that if no one else will fix this, she will. You sit nearby, letting the stillness wrap around you. The flickering oil lamp throws wide shadows across the chamber walls. You watch as she leans forward and speaks softly to her father. Something like, "Just a little longer, Baba, breathe through it." He grunts, a tired sound, like someone who's battled a headache through his teeth for far too many moons. She presses the linen gently against the swollen side of his face. The edges of his jaw are round and tense, and when he exhales, it's shaky. You wince in sympathy. Dental pain is ancient and democratic. It's one of the few human experiences that haven't changed in 5,000 years. When she finally notices you watching, she doesn't scowl. She just says, "He was a stone carver. His molars are cracked like fallen obelisks." You blink, impressed both by the metaphor and her composure. The grain dust got into everything, even the bread. Now his teeth grind pain more than food. You ask gently what she's using. "Garlic vinegar, crushed fig seeds, a little honey," she shrugs. "I read it on a scrap from the scroll bin. It looked like it worked once." You nod. There's nothing else to do. You're just here to learn. She wipes her fingers on a scrap of reed paper already covered in half-legible notes. You spot symbols for the human head, the jaw, the crescent moon. "I've been copying anything that mentions pain of the mouth," she says. "Pain that makes sleep curl up and die." She has a way with words. She reaches for a smaller pot, this one sealed with a tiny wax plug. She pulls the plug out with her teeth, spits it on the ground, and tips the pot toward you. It's full of crushed herbs, dried, crumbled. "Mint," she explains. "And dried henbane makes the head swim, sometimes helps." You've heard of henbane. Today we'd call it mildly toxic. Back then it was Tuesday. You ask if she's learned this from the temple healers. She snorts a short puff of air. "They won't teach me," she says. "Not a woman, not a scribe, but I read faster than they chant." There's pride in that, but also weariness. You feel the edge of her frustration, worn thin like a sandstone tablet. But you also see the fire. Merit is driven by something deeper than duty. You look again at her father. His breathing has slowed. The poultice must be doing something, either that or his exhaustion finally won the battle. He's asleep now, his jaw loosely swaddled in sweet-smelling linen. She sits back, legs folded beneath her, and sighs. "I just want him to eat pomegranate seeds again," she says, "not cry from them." The room grows quiet. You hear distant laughter from another chamber, probably priests debating the moon's angle. Someone dropped a jar somewhere. It clinks, then shatters. Merit doesn't flinch. You realize this isn't her first night like this. She starts cleaning up her tools. A small bronze spoon, a flat piece of shell she uses to mash things, a linen rag for blotting the worst of the ooze. Everything goes into a neatly woven basket. Scribes like order, even rogue ones. Then she does something curious. She reaches into her robe and pulls out a pendant. It's shaped like a small scarab made of green stone, strung on a faded leather thong. She holds it over her father's head and whispers something low, too soft for you to catch. You tilt your head. "Is it magic?" She catches your look and smiles. "He believes in raw more than vinegar," she murmurs, "so I use both." You smile back, "Smart girl." Merit stands, stretching her back until it pops. Then she points toward the far end of the room where scrolls are piled in crooked towers. "Come," she says, "let me show you what else I've found." You follow. The room smells like old papyrus and night air. A small window cut into the stone wall lets in moonlight that spills like silver across the floor. She lights another lamp, its wick curling with smoke. She shows you her notes, a personal scroll she's been writing. Not official temple doctrine, just one girl's observations, pages of it, lists of ingredients, symbols of teeth and stars, notations of when her father's pain grew worse and when it eased. She's charting cause and effect like a scientist or an alchemist. You scan a few lines. One entry reads, no effect, breath smelled worse, pain the same. Another, mild relief after Sekhmet offering. Coincidence, moon nearly full. She's documenting everything. Not just what works, but what fails. This isn't superstition. This is a proto-medical journal written in ancient eyeliner. You feel a strange mix of admiration and sadness. She shouldn't have to do this, but she's doing it anyway. She leans on the table, cheek resting on her arm. Her voice is muffled. If this doesn't help him, I'll try again. There's a scroll with crocodile saliva somewhere. I haven't ruled it out. You both chuckle, a soft sound in the silence. And then you swear this happens. The wind shifts, and one of the hanging amulets over the doorway rattles, even though nothing touched it. Merritt doesn't blink. The gods know I'm trying, she whispers. Outside, the temple bells chime once. The night is still young, but you can feel the weight of centuries pressing in. This isn't just a story, it's a moment. A girl, her ink-stained hands, and a stubborn promise not to let her father suffer alone. Later that night, you're back in the scriptorium, curled on a woven mat beside a low-burning brazier. The air smells like old parchment and sandalwood smoke. Across from you, Merritt kneels on a cushion, dipping her reed brush into a pool of black ink. The flickering flame throws jagged shadows across her face, tracing the furrow in her brow as she writes. She doesn't speak. She's deep in the rhythm of her work, lips occasionally moving as she copies lines from one scroll to another. You glance over her shoulder, not snooping, just curious. The characters are neat, almost painfully precise. But what draws your eye is the heading, ailments of the mouth, pains that do not sleep. That's poetic, also unsettlingly accurate. Merritt pauses, twirls the brush absent-mindedly. Then she sighs and sets it down. You ever wonder what causes pain? She asks you. Real pain, not just injury, the kind that stays even when there's no blood. You nod. Even if your mouth isn't currently on fire, you understand the question. Some discomfort is deeper than tissue. It haunts. She pushes a scroll toward you. This one's old, she says. Came from Thebes, talks about spirits, little ones that crawl into the teeth at night and bite from inside. They call them mouth shadows. You frown. Mouth shadows sounds like a metal band name, or a very ancient dental horror story. She chuckles at your expression. I know, but people believe it, my father included. You skim the scroll. It's full of vivid language. The spirit coils in the root, strikes like a serpent, drinks from the blood of the molar. Someone really went through it. Merritt taps another passage. They thought pain was divine punishment sometimes, a sign that someone had angered the gods. You nod. That tracked, especially in a culture where every bodily function had a god assigned to it. Even sneezing probably had a patron deity. Which god punishes people with molar agony? You ask. Depends, she says. Sekhmet usually, she governs both healing and vengeance, but if you lie in temple service, Thoth might strike your tongue instead. Honest scribes sleep easier. You smirk, convenient for you. She doesn't deny it. You glance back at the scrolls. There's more. Mentions of tooth worms crawling into enamel, burrowing like little demons. It's equal parts mythology and metaphor. You wonder if it was a way for them to make sense of cavities, tiny tunnels, unseen culprits, the hollowing out of something solid. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians actually believed in literal tooth worms, you say aloud, or if it was just a poetic shorthand for decay. Merritt shrugs. Does it matter? If the pain is real, does the name you give it change anything? Fair point. She rises and walks to a corner of the room. There, hanging on a narrow hook, is a small linen pouch. She unties it and spills the contents onto a cloth. Inside are small carved objects, charms and amulets. She lifts one. This is for Sekhmet's favor. A lioness carved from red carnelian. She places it beside her scroll. This, she continues, holding a chunkier piece shaped like a frog, is for cleansing. Sometimes frogs were used in childbirth protection, but I figured if it works on that kind of pain, maybe. Her logic is charming, slightly unscientific, but very charming. You pick up a tiny hippo figurine next. What's this one do? Protect from hippo bites. She grins. That one's Toweret. She's a protective goddess. I figured, if she can guard against spirits, maybe she can guard molars. You nod solemnly. That's sound dental logic. There's a lull. The flames in the brazier hiss softly, and the wind outside stirs dust along the floor. You feel the quiet settle back in like a warm blanket. Merritt sits beside you, legs tucked up, fingers idly tracing a carved glyph on the floor. You know, she says quietly, he used to sing, my father, while he worked. Taught me the songs of stone. Now he can barely hum without wincing. You feel her sadness creep between the words. She turns to you. Do you think it's really worms or spirits or just time breaking things down? You don't answer. Maybe it's all three. Maybe it doesn't matter. She sighs long and low and stands. Come with me. You follow her through another stone corridor, this one tighter, lined with shelves stacked with jars and bowls and bundles wrapped in cloth. She lights a torch and leads you toward a niche near the back. There, sitting alone on a carved pedestal, is a bowl filled with sand. Embedded in the sand are two small, blackened teeth. You raise an eyebrow, Exhibit A. She nods, from a worker who died last year. Temple healer pulled them after death to study the roots. Look. You lean closer. The teeth are cracked, grooved, and worn nearly flat. A tiny hole in one seems to lead all the way through. That, Merritt says, pointing, was what they thought the worm drilled. You stare at it, and for a second you imagine a tiny creature inside, burrowing with malicious glee. Then you shake your head. Historians still argue whether they treated the cause, or just the symptoms, you mutter. Same argument now, isn't it? She says. You look at her, she's not smiling anymore. She reaches out, sprinkles a pinch of dried mint into the bowl. For the breath, she murmurs. Even ghosts deserve kindness. You exhale deeply. As you make your way back toward the sleeping chamber, the temple feels heavier. Not with sadness, but with presence, with memory. You pass a painted wall showing a man kneeling before a god, a beam of light piercing his mouth like a laser. You pause. Is that a healing scene or an execution? Merritt glances. I think that's up to the viewer. You keep walking, your steps are slower now, thoughtful. Because this isn't just about ancient beliefs. It's about the names we give pain, the stories we tell to make it manageable. You reach the chamber again. Her father hasn't moved. The poultice is still damp, still clinging. Merritt kneels beside him and gently places the lion amulet near his hand. Then she whispers something you almost don't catch. May the gods chase the worm and grant him sleep. You're sitting just outside the sleeping chamber now, back pressed against a cool stone wall that hums softly with the heat of the day's sun, long since set. The temple is quieter, and that peculiar Egyptian quiet, never truly silent, is all around you. Somewhere a reed flute plays faintly, likely a priest or board guard passing the time, the occasional shuffle of sandaled feet. And yes, an owl hoots once, solemn and approving. Merritt reappears with a satchel slung across her shoulder, a determined squint in her eyes. You raise an eyebrow, she raises one back. We're going worm hunting. You laugh, but she's serious. She waves you along and leads the way through one of the narrower temple corridors, deeper than you've gone before. This place was built like a maze, stone passageways opening into storage rooms, shrines, and strange alcoves with murals that haven't seen moonlight in centuries. You follow Merritt past a painted doorway marked with a pair of crossed crocodiles. Crocodile charms, she says flatly. You're going to love this. You try not to roll your eyes, but what greets you in the room beyond actually does make you pause. Hanging on a wall are rows of carved talismans, crocodiles, frogs, cats, even one confused-looking vulture. Most are made of glazed faience, their colors dulled but still vivid in places, sky blues, dusty greens, cracked whites. Some are smooth and polished, others pockmarked and chipped from generations of fingers rubbing them in anxious hope. Merritt plucks one from the wall, a crocodile with tiny ruby beads for eyes, and dangles it in front of you. This, she explains, was tied around the neck of the sufferer while incantations were spoken, supposed to draw the worm out through the breath. You eye the figurine. Doesn't feel like it'd help much. Unless the worm fears reptiles, she agrees. Which, honestly, who does? She leads you to a reed mat in the corner and sets the talisman down beside a thick reed basket. She flips open the lid, and inside is a jumble of other, less decorative things. Pouches of dried herbs, knotted cords, finger-length sticks of incense, and a few tiny scrolls bound with gold thread. These are the oral spells, she says. They're supposed to be chanted while applying the remedy, makes it more effective. You blink, so garlic paste isn't enough. It needs a background track. Merritt grins. Exactly. You can't have pain relief without the proper vibe. She carefully unwraps one of the tiny scrolls. The parchment is soft, worn. She clears her throat and begins to read aloud, quietly, reverently. I call upon you, spirit of sharp fang, who crawls and gnaws in the dark mouth. Begone by Sekhmet's fire. Soothed by mint, sealed by honey. Return to the sand from which you rose. You sit back, oddly moved. The words aren't threatening. They're coaxing, like a lullaby for a demon. I've read at least 6 versions of this spell, Merritt says, rolling it back up. Some use threats, others bribes. This one's my favorite. It's polite. Maybe that's why the worm's staying, you joke. It feels welcome. She throws a dried fig at you. It misses by inches. As you poke through the basket, you find another peculiar item, a ceramic tooth. Life-sized, crude but detailed, hollow on the inside. What's this? Offering vessel, she says. They'd fill it with paste and leave it at Sekhmet's altar, symbolic sacrifice. You're tempted to ask whether Sekhmet has ever responded to a molar donation, but decide to keep that sarcasm internal, for now. Instead, you ask how many of these charms she's actually used. Too many, she admits, but the belief itself brings comfort. Sometimes that's all we need. You nod. In modern terms, it might be called the placebo effect, but here belief is part of the medicine. It's woven into the fabric of care. Herbs, honey, and hope. She tucks a few things into her satchel, amulets, spell scrolls, and a small jar of oil. I want to try a new mix tonight, she explains. Oil of blue lotus. It numbs the gums, supposedly. You follow her back toward the central hall, where the brazier's flame has dwindled to glowing coals. The air is cooler now, the temple beginning its long nocturnal hush. Her father still sleeps, breathing shallow but steady. Merritt sets the amulets beside his mat, one on each corner like a ward. She rubs the oil gently between her fingers, then dabs it along his jawline in slow, rhythmic strokes. Her lips move silently, repeating the invocation you heard earlier. It's hypnotic. You find yourself watching the shadows dance along the walls. They flicker with every motion of the flame, forming patterns that almost look like stories. A lioness chases a worm. A river parts to reveal teeth. A girl kneels beside a sleeping man, turning history with her hands. You feel a strange tightness in your chest. Something about this is bigger than you expected. You came here to watch a cure, but you're witnessing something closer to faith. Merritt finishes the ritual. She sits back, stretching her arms above her head. We wait, she murmurs. You both fall into silence again, staring at the glowing embers. After a while, she whispers. Sometimes I think the worm isn't real at all, just a name for the pain we can't fix. We give it shape so we don't feel helpless. You look over at her. Her eyes are shining in the low light. You want to tell her she's brilliant, that this mix of science and symbolism is ahead of its time. That thousands of years from now, people will still be debating what healing really means. But instead, you just say, if there was a worm, I think you scared it off. She laughs quietly. Outside, a breeze rattles the reeds. Somewhere, a crocodile-shaped amulet gives a faint clink. And her father, incredibly, does not groan. You wake, if you were ever truly asleep, to the sound of gentle grinding. Not ominous, just familiar, rhythmic. You blink your eyes open and realize it's coming from across the chamber. Merritt is crushing something in a stone mortar, her posture relaxed for once, back turned, the early blue of dawn glowing faintly on the far wall. The brazier's out, and the temple feels like it's holding its breath. You sit up slowly, blanket slipping off your shoulders. Her father is still sleeping, though his breathing sounds deeper now, less raspy. You glance down at him and blink in surprise. There's no jaw wrap, no poultice. Just his head tilted slightly to one side, lips parted, brows finally smooth. Merritt looks over her shoulder. He hasn't groaned once since midnight, she whispers. Not even during that snort thing he usually does. You smile, a true miracle. She nods toward her bowl. Let's not jinx it, this batch is just in case. You join her by the low preparation table. The mortar contains mashed garlic again. She seems loyal to that one. But it's mixed this time with powdered lotus petals and a little resin scraped from a barked twig. Acacia, she says. Sticky, bitter antiseptic. They used to pack it into tooth gaps. Mainstream or fringe, you ask. She grins. This one's borderline. Historians still argue whether it was ritual or real medicine. Personally, I think it just tastes so awful the worm runs away voluntarily. You watch as she scrapes the mixture into a small dish lined with woven fibers. She works quickly, efficiently. This isn't a trial-and-error experiment anymore. This is a process, a treatment, a ritual, yes, but also a practice. You wander toward one of the side walls, where another low shelf holds scrolls in various states of decay. Some are tightly rolled. Others have slumped into half-unraveled curls like sleeping cats. You pull one out at random, careful not to crack it. Merritt watches you read as she stirs. That's the Temple Index, records of the House of Life's treatments, the part they let people read. Meaning there's a part they do. She taps her satchel. Let's just say some scrolls fall into my hands by coincidence. You open the scroll and scan. The treatments listed vary widely. Honey compresses, crushed myrrh, soot paste, dried lizard tails. Some are familiar from her efforts, others make your stomach turn just reading them. One entry stands out. For the relief of the pulsing jaw, take the juice of a fig newly plucked, stir with resin and smear upon the cheek. Do not speak for 1 hour lest the pain return by voice. That's oddly poetic, you mutter. Also oddly hard to follow, she says, chuckling. Tell someone not to talk, they'll talk more. You keep reading. There are references to methods involving heated bronze needles, early cauterization perhaps. Another describes inserting a sliver of green copper between the gums to drain evil spirits. You show it to Merritt. That one's actually real, she says. Or they'd heat the copper and press it gently into an abscess. Most patients passed out, some were grateful. You wince. Imagine trusting someone enough to let them poke your swollen face with hot metal. She pauses. I would have done it if he asked me to. And just like that, the room softens again. You turn toward her father, still sleeping, still peaceful. A miracle, or maybe just garlic, mint, and sheer determination. She comes to sit beside you with the bowl, dipping a linen strip into the warm mixture. She doesn't apply it this time, just holds it, watching him. I think the worst is over, she whispers, but I'm scared to believe that. You nod, that feels too real. You gesture toward the basket of amulets. What's next? New spell, new statue to bribe. Merritt smiles faintly. I thought I'd do something wilder. Oh no, you say. You're not smuggling crocodiles into the temple, are you? She smacks your arm with a reed scroll. I mean I'm going to write my own cure, record it. That gets your attention, seriously. She nods. If it helped him, it might help someone else. But not just the ingredients, the whole thing. The rituals, the mistakes, the way he started breathing through his nose again after the second poultice. You raise an eyebrow. That's not very scientific. Neither are most of these scrolls, she retorts. But they lasted, maybe mine will too. You can't argue with that. She fetches a blank scroll from her personal stack. Not temple certified, not stamped by any high priest, but the papyrus is fresh and her brush hand is steady. She begins to write. You watch the first lines take shape. On the night of the waning moon, in the temple of Sekhmet, the daughter of the stone carver did apply herbs and words to banish the pain of the jaw spirit. You smile, very dramatic. She doesn't stop writing. Pain is dramatic, it deserves a proper send-off. You help her gather the scrolls and pack up her satchel. The sun is rising now, faint gold spilling across the floor, catching the edges of carved hieroglyphs and turning them momentarily into light itself. You both pause. You can hear birds waking in the rafters. Somewhere a temple priest coughs loudly, ruining the mood just enough to make you both grin. And then her father stirs. You freeze. He lifts a hand, rubs his jaw, and mutters groggily, "No burning today." Merritt gasps, not loudly, just enough to let you know this is the first time he's said that in weeks. She kneels quickly beside him. Still hurts. He blinks slowly. No, just heavy, like I've been chewing a rock in my dreams. You glance at her. She's not crying, but her eyes glisten. Then you slept, she says. You finally slept. He nods. If you made me drink frog oil again, don't tell me. She laughs, half relief, half hiccup. You step back, giving them space. This is their moment, a shared victory, garlic-breathed, moon-spelled, and frog-oiled. And it worked. Somewhere in the shadows, a crocodile charm gives another little tink. Later that day, once the morning heat thickens and the temple walls begin to hum with the low buzz of flies, you follow Merit to the back of the temple complex. Not the healing chamber or the scroll library, but somewhere quieter, stranger. The House of Healers, she calls it. But you quickly realize that this part of the temple doesn't hum with the rhythm of prayer and incense. It pulses with whispers, secrets, the kind of place that stores not answers but questions wrapped in ritual. At the entrance, two large clay jars rest like sentinels on either side of the threshold. One is sealed with wax, the other isn't, and it smells faintly of something charred. Jawbone jars, Merit says softly, used in some of the more mystical procedures. You glance at her, eyebrows up. Please tell me that's a nickname. She chuckles, but then shakes her head. Not even close. You step inside, and the air changes instantly, cooler, dense with the scent of dried herbs, mildew, and that peculiar mineral odor you always associate with old things and older intentions. The room is round, a rarity in Egyptian design. Shelves line the walls in uneven rows, stacked with oddities. You see small bundles tied in palm fiber, stone slabs etched with single glyphs, and bowls of dried flowers that have long since faded into dust. In the center of the room sits a low table. Atop it, more jars. Some sealed, some open, all labeled in hieratic scrawl that even Merit squints to decipher. She reaches for one carefully and tilts it. Inside is a human jawbone, cracked, yellowed, and still bearing 3 teeth, each worn down to the nub. You exhale slowly. This isn't a story anymore. This is evidence. They'd use these for study, Merit explains, but sometimes also in rituals. They believed you could communicate with the afflicted part of a person by engaging with its representation. So, like spiritual dentistry. Exactly, she says. They'd chant over it, offer oil to it, sometimes paint the tooth red to signal inflammation. You stare into the jar. One of the teeth is almost black. You shudder. These were from patients who'd passed right. She hesitates. Mostly, but there were cases, special ones. When the pain was so intense, they believed the tooth itself had become possessed. They'd remove it surgically, if you can call it that, and preserve it for rituals. You frown. Without anesthetic. Oh, definitely without anesthetic. You rub your jaw sympathetically. No wonder people believed in tooth demons. She opens another jar. This one's empty, save for a scrap of cloth and what looks like dried wax. Earthen warding ritual, she says. They'd heat the wax, mix it with powdered barley and frog bile, don't make that face, and press it to the gumline while chanting. Afterward, they'd bury the cloth that carried the pain. You blink, so the idea was the cloth absorbed the ache. She nods, and burying it meant burying the worm, the spirit, the curse. Whatever you believed caused it. Historians still argue whether these burial rites were symbolic or medicinal, you say. Can it be both? She replies. She motions you over to a shelf where something wrapped in linen rests atop a bundle of dried reeds. She peels the cloth back, and there it is, a spell tablet. Unlike the scrolls, this is carved into soft stone, gypsum maybe. The glyphs are shallower, painted with faint traces of red ochre and malachite green. It's beautiful in a haunted way. This is for invoking the goddess Circuit, she says. She was called on when the pain was unbearable. You glance at the inscription. The first line reads, "You who binds the breath and strikes the head, I offer silver and silence in trade." A chill curls across your shoulders. The language is sharper than the usual chants, less hopeful, more bargaining. They used this when all else failed, you ask. She nods. They'd place it under the patient's head. If the gods took the pain, the person recovered, if not. You finish the thought for her. Merit's voice is soft. It makes you wonder how much of healing is about convincing the pain it's not welcome anymore. You don't have an answer. Instead, you help her clean one of the jars. She removes the cloth gently, sprinkles a pinch of resin into the bottom, and reseals it. There's reverence in every motion, not just preservation, but respect. She points toward a narrow box on the highest shelf. You reach for it, brushing off cobwebs. Inside are small bronze tools, scrapers, picks, a curved blade that looks suspiciously like a very early dental hook. These were the elite instruments, she says. Only the high heelers used them. Some had obsidian tips. You whistle, that's fancy and terrifying. She holds up the hook. This was used for abscesses. They'd drain the infection. If they were skilled, it worked. If not. You both wince. Ever seen one used, you ask. Once, she says, on a priest. He screamed until he passed out, but the next day he ate fish without flinching. You try not to picture the procedure. Try harder not to imagine being the poor soul handed a frog charm and told to bite down. You sit back, breath fogging a cool spot on the stone wall. This wasn't just medicine, it was bravery. It had to be. Merritt wraps the tools again and tucks them away. Her hands are steady, reverent. You glance at her. So do you believe in the rituals or the tools? She pauses. I believe in trying everything. That's what makes us human. Outside, a breeze kicks up sand against the door. You hear the faint sound of chanting somewhere beyond the chamber. It feels far away. You sit in the circle of jars and jawbones and try to picture the people they once belonged to. Workers, priests, mothers, daughters, all brought low by something as small as a decaying tooth. Merritt crouches beside you, her voice low. You know, she says, sometimes I think pain listens, and it needs to hear that we're not afraid of it anymore. You nod slowly. Around you, the jars stay quiet, but something deep in the stone, in the air, feels a little lighter. The sun is slipping behind the temple rooftops again, but this time the air carries a different weight, not heavy with heat, but stretched thin by anticipation. You and Merritt make your way up a narrow stairwell carved into the stone, where torchlight flickers against painted walls of stars, snakes, and seated gods. It feels like ascending into a story. She doesn't tell you where you're going, just gives you that look, the don't ask until we're there look she's perfected over the last day. At the top, you emerge into a flat rooftop garden. Yes, a garden, sheltered by low mud brick walls and open to the endless night sky. Clay pots hold herbs barely clinging to life, and a few stone benches circle a shallow fire pit. Above you, the moon hangs fat and gold, not quite full. It bathes everything in honey light. Merritt lets out a soft sigh. Perfect night for a ritual. You arch an eyebrow. You know, most people relax under the moon with wine. You summon dental demons. She grins. Wine comes later. She places her satchel gently on a flat stone and begins laying things out. A dish of blue lotus oil, a strip of fresh linen, a small obsidian bowl filled with something dark and sticky. The crocodile charm is here too, as is the lioness amulet. You're not sure if this is medicine, magic, or a very dramatic picnic. What's the plan, you ask? I want to replicate the ritual mentioned in that cracked scroll, she says. The one with the incantation, the oils, and the moonlight. You blink, the one with the cat sacrifice. She smirks. Edited version. No cats harmed, just a little prayer, a little herb, and the hope that Sekhmet's paying attention tonight. You settle beside her as she begins. She lights a pinch of frankincense and myrrh, the smoke curling into the air in lazy spirals. She hums low under her breath, and the melody isn't entirely tuneless. It sounds old, like something sung before battles or births. Then she lifts the bowl. It's filled with a blend of oil, crushed mint, powdered charcoal, and a little honey. She dips her fingers into it, smooths it along the linen strip, then lays it in the moonlight like a priest preparing an offering. This, she says softly, isn't for him. He's sleeping. This one's for the next sufferer, the next stoneworker, the next girl who doesn't want to lose her father to a tooth. You nod. That's beautiful. She pauses, then smiles faintly, also sticky. She kneels, hands raised, eyes closed. You watch the glow of the moon catch the curve of her cheekbones. She begins to speak, not loudly, but with purpose. Sekhmet of the lion's roar. Sekhmet of the still flame. We come not in defiance, but in the ache of the jaw, and the trembling of the tongue. Let your breath cool the fire. Let your paw still the worm. You feel it, not magic exactly, but presence, intention, and that's almost more powerful. She finishes, opens her eyes slowly. The moonlight shimmers in them. You sit in silence for a while, just listening to the insects chirp and the occasional creak of the temple roof as it cools. Then you hear it, soft footsteps. You glance toward the doorway, and her father stands there, wrapped in a linen shawl, looking a little confused but otherwise upright. "I thought I smelled lotus," he says. Merritt stands quickly. "You're out of bed." He shrugs. "You weren't there. The silence got lonely." You watch the unspoken wave pass between them, relief, pride, disbelief. She crosses to him and helps him to a bench. He sits slowly but without wincing. "How do you feel?" she asks, brushing his grizzled hair from his forehead. He touches his jaw. "Not cursed, I'll take it." Merritt reaches for the linen strip, wraps it lightly around his head, not tight, just symbolic. She pats it gently, "Just in case." He chuckles. "If I ever meet this worm, I owe it a slap." They both laugh, and you do too, quietly. It's such a human thing to laugh after the worst of it passes, even if the memory still throbs under the skin. Then, without warning, a cat slinks onto the rooftop. Sleek, amber-eyed, silent as a whisper, it sits beside the fire, blinking slowly at the three of you. Merritt freezes. Her father raises an eyebrow. "Is that?" "Temple cat," she whispers. "They come and go, don't usually show up for rituals." The cat yawns. Then it walks over to her father, rubs its head once against his shin, and disappears back into the shadows like it was never there. You stare. Merritt stares. Her father blinks. "Guess Sekhmet got the message." You all burst into laughter. Deep, warm, the kind that rinses something out of your chest you didn't know was stuck there. Later, you sip warm lotus tea while the fire burns low. Her father drifts off again, wrapped in a blanket. Merritt's eyes are heavy, but she's smiling. "I don't know if that did anything," she murmurs, "but I know I feel better." You nod. Sometimes that's all it takes. She stretches out beside the fire, hands folded under her head. And above you, the moon continues its slow drift across the sky, watching like it always has. By mid-morning, the rooftop spell has worn off a little. The temple is awake again, priests shuffling, sandals slapping, somewhere a goat bleating in protest at being used for something it definitely did not consent to. You and Merritt descend the stairs into the main archive room, where scrolls are stacked like termite mounds, and the dust is so thick you can actually write your name in it. Which you do immediately. Merritt's mood is strange today, light but fidgety. She hums under her breath as she sorts through piles of old parchment, muttering half-formed thoughts like, "No, that's the wrong rain," and not the onion poultice again. You glance up from where you've been squinting at a faded glyph. What exactly are we looking for? Her eyes twinkle, something that doesn't officially exist. You sigh, "Of course." She pulls a battered scroll from a deep shelf and unrolls it carefully on the floor between you. The ink is smeared, the edges nibbled by time or bugs, or possibly both, but the markings are still visible. "This isn't in the temple's healing registry," she says, "but I saw it referenced once in a letter between two physician priests. It mentions a lost papyrus tucked between entries on bone setting and dream interpretation." You lean in. "So, either dental surgery or prophetic molars." "Exactly," she says, grinning. She digs deeper and produces another scroll, this one wrapped in faded red twine and sealed with a bit of old wax, cracked but intact. She blows gently on the surface, revealing a symbol stamped faintly into the corner. You squint. "That's not a healing mark." "No," she says, voice low. "It's an archive exclusion mark." "Meaning?" "Meaning this was hidden, deliberately." She breaks the seal with the edge of a reed blade, careful not to tear the papyrus. It opens slowly, like an old jaw stretching after too long clenched. You both go still. The writing is sharper than most scrolls, etched with a kind of urgency. The glyphs crowd each other, no space wasted. A few lines are smudged, but what you can read makes your scalp tingle. "Concerning the spirit tooth and the needle of light," you read aloud. "The opening of the root and the release of flame." You trail off. "Flame." Merritt looks equally unnerved and intrigued. "This sounds like surgery." You point to a diagram on the left, a rough sketch of a human mouth, shockingly accurate, not artistic, technical. A line points to a tooth where a hollow is marked with red pigment. Another line, straight and narrow, pierces it downward. The tool is labeled M-Teher, or the reaching sting. "That could be a needle," she whispers, "or a probe." You sit back, Are we saying they had dental drills? She shrugs. Historians still argue whether they did, but this looks like one. You read further. With obsidian cooled in milk, the sting may enter the hollow. Flame shall leave. Do not speak for 7 turns of Ra. Obsidian cooled in milk, you ask? Volcanic glass, she says. They used it for surgical blades, razor sharp. The milk was probably symbolic. You imagine it, a healer hunched over a suffering patient, muttering spells while jabbing obsidian into a blackened molar. No anesthesia, no antibiotics, just precision, courage, and a good chunk of faith. Could this be real, you whisper? She hesitates. That's the question. This scroll isn't in any known registry. It could be fringe, experimental, or someone didn't want it shared. You sit in silence for a long moment. The room feels suddenly heavier, like the scroll itself is emitting heat. Or maybe that's your imagination, fueled by the phrase, release of flame. Merritt reaches the final few lines. If the voice returns before the worm departs, the fire shall remain. She shudders. That's either poetic or a very weird way to say don't talk while healing. You both laugh nervously. Then she points to the corner of the scroll. Beneath the text, someone has scrawled a personal note. Tested on the scribe ailing, pain ceased, breath returned, tooth lost. You both go quiet. Maybe it worked, she says, but not cleanly. Maybe it saved his life, you add, but not the tooth. She rolls the scroll slowly, carefully, then wraps it again in its red twine. She places it in a clay jar and marks the outside with a soft glyph, Netjeru Wea, sacred and dangerous. As she seals it, you ask, are you going to copy it? She pauses. Eventually, but not yet. I want to understand it first, and I don't want this knowledge falling into hands that don't respect what it meant to those who suffered. You nod, that's fair. Knowledge like flame can warm or burn. You both sit in the hush of the archive for a long while after that. The air is cool and still, the dust less annoying somehow. You feel like you've just touched something old and secret and powerful, something that even the gods might side-eye warily. Hey, you murmur, do we count as archaeologists now? Merritt snorts. You haven't even deciphered the difference between a ritual spatula and a tongue scraper. So, intern archaeologists. She smiles. Fine, but if you try that obsidian drill thing on me, I'm moving to Mesopotamia. You promise solemnly never to wield obsidian recreationally. And in that quiet, sacred place, between fire scrolls, dental ghosts, and a girl determined to outwit pain itself, you realize this story isn't over. You're only just brushing the surface. The next evening falls like a silk sheet over the temple, soft, fragrant, and filled with the warm hush of a day well survived. You're back in Merritt's quarters, the air scented faintly with lotus and mint, her writing mat unrolled across the floor. Her father sleeps soundly in the next room. No raps, no moans, just the low, rhythmic wheeze of a man reclaiming dreams long denied. Merritt is sitting cross-legged, her reed brush dancing across fresh papyrus. The candlelight catches her ink-stained fingertips and the determined tilt of her eyebrows. She's transcribing her own notes now, blending traditional wisdom with what she's seen, tried, and refused to believe blindly. You lean against the cool stone wall, watching. After a long silence, she looks up. You know what I want to do next. You raise an eyebrow. I want to test a blend, something I thought of last week before he got worse. I didn't try it because I didn't want to risk it back then. You sit forward. What's in it? She uncaps a small jar and sets it between you. It smells sharp, spicy, earthy, and slightly smoky. Mustard seed, she says, mixed with myrrh, fig sap, and a pinch of fermented date wine. The idea is to draw heat into the gum, not away, force the spirit, or whatever you want to call it, out through discomfort. You wince. So, a spicy eviction notice for the tooth demon. Exactly. You're not sure whether to applaud or run. She reaches for a strip of fresh linen, soaks it gently in warm water, then pats it dry. With slow, practiced care, she spreads the paste across the fabric, eyes narrowing at the way it soaks in. I won't use this on him, she says quickly. Not now, he's improving. This is just an experiment, a proof of concept. You nod, so who's your test subject? She raises an eyebrow. You do have all your teeth, right? You scoot away dramatically, nearly knocking over a jar of dried marjoram. I'm kidding, she says, laughing. I'll test it on myself. No pain, just pressure. I want to know how it feels. She tears the linen in half and presses a strip to her own cheek, just over her lower jaw. At first, nothing. Then her eyes widen slightly. Warm, she murmurs. Then hot, not painful, just alert. You watch her closely. After a few moments, she peels it away and smells it. Still potent, might be good for early infection, or for scaring off spirits who hate flavor. Or for attracting every fly in Memphis, you mutter. She grins and scribbles something on a nearby tablet. You help her clean up, stacking the test materials neatly. Then you notice she's drawn a symbol in the corner of her papyrus, a spiral with a line cutting through it. What's that? My mark, she says. My signature. If I'm going to document this for others, I want them to know it was me. You study it. Simple, elegant, memorable. You're going to be famous. She shrugs, or blamed for a really bad dental incident. You both laugh, but something about her tone tells you she's thinking long-term. She's not just patching her father back together, she's building something. A system, a framework, a kind of whispered rebellion against chaos and suffering. Later that night, you help her prepare another compress, this one for comfort. Crushed mint, a touch of honey, and just a few drops of rose oil for scent. Nothing too spicy. She doesn't even heat it, just cools it slightly in a clay bowl of water, then places it beside her father's mat in case he needs it before sleeping. As you do, he stirs. His eyes open, blink slowly. Little healer, he mumbles. Merritt kneels beside him. You're awake. He nods, the pain's far, not gone, but far. She smiles, and you feel something loosen in your chest. He reaches for her hand, pats it clumsily. You scared it off, whatever it was. She says nothing, just smiles and adjusts the blanket over his shoulders. You leave the room quietly to give them a moment. In the main hall, you stare up at the painted ceiling, the constellations drawn in blue and gold, the long oar of the sun god's bark slicing across eternity. You wonder how many people have stood here, aching, hoping, maybe praying, maybe applying garlic to their gums and begging it to work. Merritt joins you a few minutes later, a tired look on her face, but something triumphant in her posture. I think it's time, she says softly. Time for what? She lifts the satchel you've come to recognize as her personal lab. To formalize the experiment, to write my own version of the cure. You follow her back to the archive, where she clears a space beside the fire pit and rolls out a blank scroll. Not the kind used for copying sacred hymns or royal decrees. This is something else. She begins writing, slowly, with full ceremonial focus. You read over her shoulder as she titles it. Remedy for the agony of the jaw when the gods are silent. You watch her shape each line with care. She includes everything, the ingredients, yes, but also the conditions of use. Apply under moonlight when heat from the sun has faded. Let the sufferer breathe mint steam before treatment. She doesn't skip the emotional elements either. The hand of the healer must be calm. The voice should not be sharp. Speak gently, for the spirit may be listening. You swallow hard. This isn't just a cure, it's a philosophy. By the time she finishes the first section, the candle is almost burned down. She leans back, hand cramped, eyes bleary, but smiling. That's part one, she says. You nod. It's beautiful. It's just practical. It's both. She closes her eyes for a moment. You cover the scroll with a cloth to protect the ink. Outside, the temple bells chime softly. Midnight again. Another day passed, another night earned. As you watch Merritt curl up beside her satchel, the firelight dancing across her cheek, you realize that this girl isn't waiting for the world to give her wisdom. She's writing it herself. The next day begins slowly, with the golden hush of a warm Egyptian morning wrapping itself around the temple like gauze. The buzz of activity hasn't quite returned, just soft footfalls and the occasional rustle of a reed broom brushing away sand. You find yourself back in the healing chamber, the walls still dim from the night, though a few rays of sunlight now leak through the upper slits like searching fingers. Merritt is there, of course, kneeling beside her father. He's sitting upright this time, sipping what looks like watered date juice, face relaxed in a way you hadn't seen since you arrived. His cheek is still a little puffy, but the eyes, those eyes are sharp again. Present. Merritt smiles at you, then rises. Something strange happened last night. You arch an eyebrow. stranger than ghost worms and moon rituals. She chuckles. The temple cat came back. Same one. I think so. It watched me write for a full hour, then sat on the scroll until I lit incense. You glance around. Where is it now? She shrugs. Gone again, probably out judging someone else. You both laugh, but there's a quiet unease between the lines. You're both thinking the same thing. Something shifted. Something worked, and whether it was magic, method, or just a blessed turn of biology, neither of you are in a rush to explain it away. Later that afternoon, Merritt returns with a wooden tray, and this time she isn't alone. Behind her walks an older woman in dark robes with thin silver rings around each wrist and a nose that could slice limestone. She doesn't smile, but her eyes are wide with alertness, like a hawk sizing up a mouse, or more likely another hawk. This, Merritt says carefully, is high healer Nitocrit. You stand up instinctively. This is someone you don't joke with, not because she's stern, but because you get the sense she's already 3 steps ahead of your sarcasm. Nitocrit steps forward, peers down at Merritt's father. She leans close, lifts his chin, examines the side of his jaw with fingers that tremble only slightly from age. Tell me where it hurts, she says simply. He presses a thumb to his cheek, no more than the weight of a pebble. She grunts approval maybe and turns to Merritt, the compress. Mint garlic resin, a drop of lotus, cool infusion twice daily. And the ritual. Adapted from Papyrus Kemet B, entry 13. Nitocrit raises an eyebrow. That scroll's restricted. Merritt doesn't blink. It was in the waste pile. Still restricted. You watch the two of them square off. Nitocrit is not pleased, but she isn't angry either. She's curious. That's more dangerous. What made you think to alter the sequence? Nitocrit asks. Merritt glances at her father. Desperation and the cat. A pause, then unbelievably Nitocrit smiles. Barely. Clever answer. She steps closer to you, eyes narrowed. And who are you? Mostly decorative, you say. Nitocrit blinks once. She turns back to Merritt. You'll show me the scroll. Merritt hesitates, then nods. Yes, but I've added my own notes. I don't want them erased. They won't be, Nitocrit says, but they will be copied. You watch the weight of that settle over Merritt. It's a mixed gift, recognition, yes, but also absorption into the larger body. Once the temple takes it, her work won't be hers anymore. It'll be theirs. I want it signed, she says quietly, with my seal. Nitocrit studies her, unusual but allowed. You breathe again. The older woman turns and walks to the door. Before she leaves, she pauses. Well done, she says, then she's gone. Merritt stares at the space she occupied like it's still echoing. Did she just validate you? You ask. Merritt exhales slowly. I think I'm still processing that. That evening, the two of you light a small lamp in celebration. Not a festival exactly, but the equivalent of a modern, we did something weird and it worked, party. There's bread dipped in oil, soft dates, and a bit of leftover wine someone definitely borrowed from the priest's stash. You clink clay cups together and smile in the glow. I still don't know what really did it, she admits. The herbs, the ritual, the scroll, the fact that I refuse to give up. Does it matter, you ask? She shakes her head. Not right now. You watch the fire flicker. The flame is steady, strong. You think about the temple cat, the sealed scroll, the obsidian tool no one's supposed to mention. So what do you call it, you ask? The whole cure, your version. Merritt thinks for a moment, then she grins. The bite of Sekhmet. You laugh, too dramatic. You love it. You do. As the fire burns lower, you help her pack the scroll away in a jar. She paints her seal, her little spiral-cut glyph on the side, then sets it gently beside the other temple jars. But this one stands out. This one is hers. Before you sleep, you walk past her father's room. He's humming softly, some old stonecutter's tune, off-key and gentle. You pause outside the doorway, listening. Merritt joins you. He hasn't hummed in moons, she says softly. The worm's gone. Or maybe it never existed. Either way, the silence has lifted. And somewhere in the temple, you swear, something feline and smug purrs in the shadows. The next morning, you wake to something unusual, not the creaking of sandals or the sharp scent of frankincense, but laughter. Honest, belly-deep laughter. It takes you a moment to recognize the voice. Then you realize it's her father, seated in the courtyard with a younger priest, recounting, of all things, a dream about spitting out a golden tooth that immediately began to insult him. Merritt strolls by, grinning as she balances a jug of water on one hip. "He's back," she says simply, and that's the truth of it, not just pain-free but restored. You nod, stretching beneath the shade of a palm, and think this chapter should be ending, but instead a new visitor arrives. The palace messenger doesn't knock. He glides into the courtyard with the self-importance of a man who's never stubbed his toe on a temple step in his life. He wears the insignia of the scribal guild, clean linen, a bronze stylus tucked into his belt. "I come from the archives of the House of Horus," he announces, "by request of the physician scribe Menka." Merritt raises an eyebrow. "The royal dentist." The man nods. He heard rumor of an unregistered treatment with effective results. He wishes to examine it. You blink, rumor travels fast. Merritt sighs, or the cat has been talking. Either way, within the hour, you find yourself crossing the Nile by reed boat, the breeze hot but welcome on your face. The palace complex looms ahead, sandstone towers gleaming in the sunlight, banners snapping lazily in the wind. Merritt hasn't stopped fidgeting since you left the temple. You finally ask, nervous. "Terrified," she replies. The man once extracted a crown from a prince mid-procession without making him faint. His hands are practically blessed. You resist the urge to joke about celebrity dentists. Barely. The palace complex is quieter than expected. You're ushered through a series of shaded courtyards and stone corridors until you arrive at a cool chamber that smells faintly of cedar and dried clove. There, hunched over a wax tablet, is Menka, the man himself. He doesn't look like royalty. He's older than Merritt expected, with thinning hair, steady hands, and the faintly hunched posture of someone who spent his life leaning over other people's mouths. He glances up as you enter, eyes sharp beneath a furrowed brow. "So," he says, "you're the girl who frightened away the worm." Merritt, to her credit, does not correct him. She steps forward and offers the scroll, sealed in its jar. He unrolls it slowly, reading in silence, then again, then a third time. You both stand there, trying not to fidget. Finally, he sets it down. "Your use of blue lotus oil in a cold compress is unconventional," he says. Merritt nods. "I tried heat. It intensified the swelling." He taps his fingers against the table. "You altered the dosage of garlic from the traditional weight." "It burned. Most remedies do." He steeples his fingers, looking at her as though trying to peer through her forehead. "Historians still argue whether Sekhmet rituals have measurable effects," he says. Merritt replies, "I argue that sleep is measurable. He slept." Silence, then he smiles. It's faint, but it's real. "Would you demonstrate the process?" he asks. She nods, already reaching for her satchel. Over the next hour, she walks him through every step, laying out the herbs, describing the steam prep, even chanting the invocation while he listens, stone-faced. When it's done, he gestures to a nearby bench. "I would like you to apply the compress to me." Merritt blinks. "Are you?" "Currently ache-free, but I want to understand the sensation, even if imagined." He leans back. She presses the cooled strip to the side of his jaw, fingers trembling slightly. He closes his eyes. A minute passes, then another. Finally, he opens them. "There is a softness to it," he murmurs, "like mint melting beneath a sunstone." You and Merritt exchange a look, poetic dentists who knew. He straightens, clears his throat. This is worth recording, not as a replacement for surgical methods, but as a companion to them, a soothing first measure. Merritt's eyes widen. "You mean?" "I will submit it for preservation," he says, "as a formal entry under the auxiliary practices ledger." You try not to cheer aloud. But, he adds, it will need refinement, measurements, testing, a second version. Merritt nods quickly. "I've already started on that." He smiles again, just slightly. "I thought you might have." Before you leave, he hands her a small clay seal, his personal insignia. "If any temple challenges your authorship, show them this." Merritt accepts it with both hands, stunned silent. You walk out of the chamber, blinking at the sunlight, suddenly too bright. "Well," you say, Not bad for a girl with garlic breath. She laughs. I'm going to frame this seal. I'm going to write a ballad about it. She swats your shoulder, but the joy in her eyes is undeniable. As you board the reed boat back across the river, you glance at her, sitting quietly, clay seal in her palm, staring out across the water. You okay, you ask. She nods slowly. It's not that it worked, it's that someone believed me. And that, you think, is the real cure. The next morning in the Temple Market District, the air is thick with spice and chatter. You're shoulder to shoulder with people selling everything from dried figs to copper trinkets shaped like miniature gods. The aroma of roasting onions and fish wrapped in lotus leaves wafts through the breeze, tangling itself around sun-slicked awnings and faded murals. Merritt S. in her element, browsing jars, poking dried roots, haggling like someone who's had a week of practice turning household kitchen items into medical miracles. I need figs, she mutters, grabbing 3 overripe ones from a mat without breaking stride. Also something sharp, not astringent sharp, like a smell that could wake a dead tooth. You trail behind, ducking under a hanging curtain of garlic braids. You say that like it's a real thing. She whirls around. Have you smelled fermented fish sauce? You gag on cue. She nods approvingly. This batch isn't for my father, she explains. I want to try building a gentler paste, something for pain relief without the punch. Not everyone can handle the garlic mint combo. You watch her scoop fly dung from a clay dish, with all the reverence of someone picking out sapphires. Please tell me that's not what I think it is. Dung from fruit flies, she confirms. Don't look at me like that, it's in the Ebers papyrus. So is lizard fat. Don't tempt me, she says. She buys a pouch, ties it off, and adds it to her growing satchel of horrors. Then she leads you to a narrow alley lined with herb stalls, most of which smell like your grandmother's attic if it were built on a compost heap. Here, things get stranger. A vendor offers her a jar of powdered cow bone. Another tries to upsell her on scorpion oil. Merritt smiles politely and refuses both, but scribbles a note about the oil. For inflammation, she says, or necromancy, depends on the region. Eventually, she stops at a low stone table where a woman with skin like leather and eyes like polished obsidian is stirring something in a pot. Fermented date mash, the woman croaks. Good for stomachs, better for bad mouths. Merritt leans in. How much? The woman eyes her. For you, 1 song and 3 copper. You blink. She's bartering for music. Merritt clears her throat, then softly begins to hum. The tune is ancient, something you heard in the temple, low and looping like wind against sandstone. The woman nods with every verse. At the end, she tosses Merritt a chunk of mashed date wrapped in cloth. Merritt grins. She's one of the old healers, she explains. They believe melody changes the properties of herbs. Do you? She shrugs. I believe it makes things taste less like fly poop. You can't argue with that. You head back toward the temple as the sun tilts westward, casting long shadows between buildings. On the way, you pass a few sick workers sitting in shade, nursing bandaged jaws or holding ice jars to swollen cheeks. Merritt pauses by one man, maybe 40, hunched and pale. She kneels beside him. Too much pain to chew, she asks. He nods, eyes sunken. She opens her satchel, pulls out the cooled compress she made that morning, this one infused with fig mash, ground mustard, and a drop of temple wine. She presses it gently to his cheek. You'll feel warmth, she says, then sleep. The man doesn't speak, but you see the tension in his neck slacken after a minute. His breathing slows. Merritt leaves him with a small cloth pouch of herbs. You both continue on. You do that a lot, you ask. When I can, people won't always ask the temple for help. Too expensive, too proud. You're like the underground molar whisperer. She smirks, only during festival season. Back inside the temple, she sets up a small experiment near the garden, just a stone bench, 3 jars, and a wax tablet. Each jar contains a different blend, 1 fig-based, 1 fermented, and 1 spiked with cloves and barley paste. She dips a cloth into each, then presses them to different points along her forearm, tracking the heat, the smell, the sting. After 20 minutes, she jots down. Clove-barley blend numbs slightly, too bitter. Fig-mustard combo reduces pulse sensation. Fly dung still smells like death. She sighs, sets the tablet down. Then you both hear it, someone approaching. A young novice, barely old enough to shave, panting and holding a scroll. "For you," he says, bowing so hard he nearly knocks himself over. Merritt unrolls it, her eyes widen. "It's from Menka." You lean closer. "Your composition has been archived under Secondary Remedies, entry 46, reproduced without amendment. Credit sealed with your glyph. Well done. Should you wish to collaborate further, reply with a courier." You both stare at the message, then at each other. "I made the archives," she breathes. "Me." You grin. Your spicy fig spitball just became canonical. She sits down hard, laughing into her hands. You let her have the moment. It's earned. She worked without a title, without permission, without guidance. She experimented with what others threw away. And now her name, or at least her mark, sits in a place reserved for the most trusted hands. That night the two of you walk the temple garden again. The breeze is cooler. The air tastes like jasmine and dust. She holds the scroll tightly in one hand and a fly dung compress in the other. "This," she says, holding them up, "is balance." You nod, "Beauty and the paste." She snorts, "I'm going to tell that to my grandchildren one day." You glance at her sideways. You're already planning to traumatize them with dental tales. "Oh, absolutely. It's the family legacy now." You both laugh, and beneath your feet, the earth feels steadier. In the dark, something scampers by. The temple cat again. It pauses, blinks, and swear to Sekhmet winks. By now, you've seen enough strange things in this temple to become desensitized. Ancient rituals powered by garlic, cats that seem clairvoyant, and people swearing solemn oaths over jars of fermented figs. But tonight, you're lying awake on your reed mat beneath the stars, staring at the constellations scratched into the ceiling, and you feel the creeping question you've tried to ignore all this time slink in like a shadow through the door. Was any of this real? You roll the thought around in your head like a stone in your palm, smooth, a little cold, deceptively heavy. Because the truth is, even with all the success, even with the scroll in the archives and her father healed, you can't quite pin down what worked. Was it the ingredients, the ritual, the timing, the belief? You wander into the main hall. Merritt's already there, sitting cross-legged, surrounded by notes. There's a line of half-burned candles casting uneven shadows, and for a second she looks like a priestess in some sacred trance. Then she sees your face and waves you over, all trance broken. "You're thinking about the same thing I am," she says before you can speak. You nod. Did it actually work, or did it just feel like it did? She sighs, rubbing her temples. "That man I helped yesterday, his pain came back this morning." You blink, "Same spot?" She nods, "Same cheek, same radiating pulse," said it felt like the worm had returned. You sit down beside her. "What did you do?" "Gave him a clove compress. Didn't chant. Didn't burn incense. Didn't ask the gods to babysit my paste. And he said it helped, but not like before, not the same kind of peace." You lean back against the stone. "So maybe it is the ritual." "Or maybe," she says slowly, "the ritual just amplifies what's already working, like a tuning fork for belief." You glance around at the collection of herbs, tools, and odd objects she's assembled. Fly dung, garlic bulbs, scraps of linen still faintly soaked in lotus oil. It all looks like medicine, but it also looks like performance. "What if none of it matters," you say, "except that the person believes it does?" Merritt doesn't answer at first. Instead, she reaches for one of her tablets and flips it over. On the back, she's been sketching, not glyphs, but people, scenes. In one, a young girl presses a poultice to an older man's cheek. In another, two figures kneel beneath a crescent moon, herbs scattered between them. In the final image, a temple cat curls beside a scroll, tail flicking, eyes closed in what may or may not be smug satisfaction. "These aren't instructions," she says, "they're memory." You nod slowly. "Historians still argue whether any of the ancient methods actually cured pain," she continues. "But I think they're missing the point." You raise an eyebrow. She looks at you with that spark again, the one you've come to associate with discovery and mild danger. "The point is that we tried," she says. "That when pain came, we didn't just sit with it. We created rituals, blended herbs, whispered to the stars. We built meaning around the ache. Isn't that kind of beautiful?" You think about it, not just the methods, but the mindset. People thousands of years ago, desperate and creative and deeply human, wrapping mystery in ritual and calling it hope. You nod. Merritt stands up and stretches, then walks over to a shelf and returns with a jar. She uncorks it and holds it under your nose. You gag. Is that the fly dung? Nope, she says proudly. It's the fermented grape version. You blink. That's worse. She laughs. Exactly. She dabs a tiny amount onto a strip of linen, sprinkles it with dried mint, then places it on your palm. Try to believe in it, she whispers. You look at the cloth, smell it, touch it. You don't put it in your mouth, obviously, but you do sit with it for a while, just holding it. And strangely, you start to feel calmer. Not because of the smell, definitely not, but because the gesture itself means something. It's connection, care, legacy. That's the medicine, Merritt says. That's the real part. You glance sideways. What if people find this scroll in 1,000 years and try to recreate it exactly? She smirks. They'll be chasing ghosts. You both fall into silence again. Outside, you hear the night breeze rustle the date palms. Somewhere, a priest is humming an old hymn, off-key and lovely. And in the dark, Merritt leans back and closes her eyes. I think, she murmurs, that whether or not the worm exists, I won. You don't ask her what she means. You already know. She won by caring, by choosing effort over silence, by picking up the brush and the pestle and doing something when doing nothing would have been easier. You sit together until the candles burn low, until the temple grows quiet again. And when you finally get up to leave, the cat is there, again. It watches you. You stop. I know you're not just a cat, you mutter. It blinks, then turns and walks away. You feel no different, but maybe, just maybe, something inside your chest, something that had been aching too, feels a little quieter now. The next morning breaks with a kind of golden clarity that feels symbolic, if you were the poetic type. Sunlight washes over the temple courtyard like warm milk, smoothing every stone, soaking the bricks in comfort. The air smells of crushed basil, sweet bread baking, and the damp heat of linen drying on ropes. You find Merritt by the outer well, sleeves rolled up, splashing water onto bundles of fresh herbs. She looks almost relaxed, almost. You slept, you say, surprised. She nods, eyes twinkling. For the first time in 3 nights, no dreams about teeth falling out either. You help her rinse the herbs. Today's batch includes the usual mint and garlic, but also something new, dried rose petals. For scent, you ask. For softness, she replies. Pain responds differently to comfort than it does to fear. I'm starting to think that matters. As you carry the herbs back toward the inner hall, a group of younger acolytes pass you, each holding small scrolls and balancing them like their sacred offerings. One nods at Merritt, wide-eyed. Is it true you cured a craftsman's tooth with wine and cat breath? Merritt doesn't miss a beat, only on Wednesdays. The boys scatter, giggling. Later, in the shadow of the archive wall, she lays out her writing mat one last time. The scroll before her is long, longer than anything she's written before. This isn't a recipe. It's not even a spell. It's a story. She dips her brush into fresh ink and begins to write, not about Sekhmet or rituals or poultices, but about a moment, a person, a truth. He was tired, the pain curled him like a dying leaf, but still he smiled. Still he waited for someone to try, and I tried. Her reed scratches gently against the papyrus as she continues. You don't interrupt. You just sit beside her, watching words appear where silence used to live. Eventually, she lifts the brush, blows gently across the ink, and turns to you. I want to leave this for someone else, she says, someone who doesn't know where to start. You want to pass it on. She nods, like a torch or a very stinky bandage. You grin, both ideally. You help her tie the scroll with red twine, just like the one that held the forbidden knowledge from before. This one, though, is different. This one carries not warnings, but wisdom, earned the long way. She presses her spiral mark into the wax seal, then hands you the scroll. For you, she says, you've been here through everything. Consider this your degree in ancient mouth magic. You tuck it under your arm like a diploma and bow exaggeratedly. Do I also get a license to apply garlic compresses? She laughs, only under supervision. Later that day, you both walk down the long outer corridor toward the Temple of Thoth, where records are kept for generations. A scribe greets you at the entrance, and after a brief exchange, Merritt is permitted to place the scroll into a clay jar and slide it onto a shelf marked with the glyph for independent works. She lingers for a moment, fingers brushing the jar's lip. You nudge her gently, proud. She nods slowly, but not for me, for him, for the fact that I got to help. You walk back in silence, the kind that doesn't need filling, the kind that hums with peace. That evening you return to her father's side for one last meal. He's laughing with two other workers, pointing at a chipped molar and calling it his souvenir from the Worm War. He sees you and Merritt, lifts a cup of watered wine. To my daughter, he says, savior of jaws, slayer of breath spirits. To Sekhmet, one of the others adds. To garlic, says the third. You all toast. As the stars begin to bloom above you, Merritt stands, walks to the courtyard's edge, and pulls something from her satchel. A blank scroll, a fresh brush. You tilt your head, another scroll. She smiles. For whoever comes next, they'll need a place to begin. This one, she says, won't be for the archives. This one she'll leave in the temple library's open shelf, among the well-used ones, stained with oil and corner-folded by hands long gone. A beginning, not an ending. The fire crackles behind you. The scent of mint hangs in the air. The world feels soft at the edges. Merritt turns to you one last time. Do you think anyone will remember this? You don't hesitate. Only everyone who's ever had a toothache and dared to hope. By now the temple feels like a second skin. The stone corridors no longer echo. They breathe with you. The soft creak of reed mats, the hush of distant chanting, the feline flicker of a tail disappearing around a corner, all familiar, all part of the rhythm you've fallen into like a melody you didn't know you knew. You find Merritt alone in the central courtyard, seated on the low wall by the lotus pool. The water's surface reflects the deepening twilight, petals bobbing gently like sleepy ships on a slow river. She's holding something in her lap, a small wooden box, neatly carved, sealed with wax. She looks up as you approach and gestures for you to sit. You do quietly. Inside the box are 3 scrolls. One is the original recipe, she says. One is my revised process, and the third, she hesitates. The third is a letter for whoever finds this. You glance down, you're burying it. She nods, it's tradition. Some healers bury their work, hide it beneath the temple or in the garden. They say the knowledge sinks into the earth and grows into wisdom for someone else. You raise an eyebrow, poetic. She grins, also slightly moldy. The box is wrapped in old-treated cloth, sealed again and tied with fresh linen. Together you carry it to a quiet corner of the herb garden, the one with the crooked date palm and the crooked stone to match. She digs with her hands, no tools, fingers pressing through soil like she's done this before. You help her lower the box in, then cover it again with care. A breath passes between you, and then it's done. You both sit in silence afterward, watching the sky bruise into night. The stars begin to form, slow and sleepy, blinking like ancient eyes remembering everything. I'll miss this, you murmur. Merritt smiles, you'll take it with you. And you will, the smell of mint and resin, the crackle of papyrus, the sound of her father humming a tune about teeth and granite, the cat, the rituals, the question marks scrawled into the margins of every remedy. She pulls something from her robe, another scroll, thinner this time. Unrolled, it contains one simple recipe, the garlic mint paste, the first one that worked. This, she says, is for your satchel. You take it with care, feeling the weight of it, not heavy, but meaningful. As the night deepens, she lights a final bowl of myrrh, the smoke curling upward like a soft question. Neither of you speaks, there's nothing left to say. Just memories now, and warmth. And the sense that somewhere, in some distant future, a young healer will find a faded scroll and smile at the strange combination of ingredients, and try it anyway. Because pain is eternal, but so is the need to ease it. And those two truths, tangled together, have shaped more history than empires ever could. The garden is quiet now. The moonlight slips like silver thread across the low stone wall, and the last breeze of the night stirs the herb leaves just enough to remind you it's still there. Somewhere behind you, the temple cat purrs once, low and steady, before disappearing again into the shadows. You close your eyes just for a moment, and in that darkness you still see it all. The warm gleam of oil lamps flickering against papyrus, the shimmer of moonlight on blue lotus petals, the soft sigh of someone sleeping without pain for the first time in weeks. You hear Merritt's laugh again, that tired but triumphant sound. You feel the warmth of the healing compress in your hand. You smell garlic, mint, and just a trace of jasmine drifting through the hallways like an old melody. And you remember the lesson, not in words but in feeling. That healing isn't always about perfection. It's about trying, about showing up with whatever you've got, herbs, hands, hope, and saying, I'm here, I care. Let's begin. You feel your body soften now, shoulders sinking, eyes heavy. The day is done. The ache, if there ever was one, has eased. Let it go. Let the stars blink above you, and the night cradle you like a slow wave on the Nile. You're safe now, you're resting. You're wrapped in a story older than kings. And maybe, somewhere deep in the quiet of your mind, a little lion-headed goddess smiles. Sleep well,